Love them or hate them, we can't live without our Virgos. Or can we?
You're Libra, aren't you?
I'm Libra, but I do have Venus in Virgo, conjunct Pluto and the South Node. So I do get the Venus and the Virgo energy. So this is, do you know, obviously most of you will know Borges. He's famous for many things, including magic realism and labyrinths, writing about labyrinths. Funny enough, he was Virgo. And this was his dream, his paradise, a library.
Probably he had Mercury in Virgo as well.
No, he didn't.
Libra.
No.
Mercury, Libra.
I think it was in Leo, actually.
Yeah.
I've got a chart later, we can have a look. So I'm going to go and I'm going to start with some generic stuff. So I'm talking about Virgo in general, and then we will be looking at the Pluto-Uranus conjunction from the 60s, which is very important, obviously, I think, for all of us. And finally, we'll be looking at some charts of interesting Virgo personalities or people that we know. So we start with the symbol and myth. Very briefly, do you know what the glyph represents in Virgo? I mean, if I go back, what does it represent?
A mother holding a child.
Oh, that's sweet.
But that it is actually, according to esoterics, that's the symbol of the mother holding the baby.
It's happened to say a virgin crossing her leg.
I can see.
Yes, that's close. It actually, apparently, is the hymen. There you go. Well, that's one interpretation anyway. Or it could also be looked at as the intestines, because, you know, Virgo obviously rules the stomach area. So, or it could just be the M from medicine, from Latin, medicina. So it's up to you, whatever you wanted to signify anyway. I do suspect that the hymen debate is more a postscript during the post-Christian era, but we can talk about whether or not Virgo means virgin. Do you think it does?
No.
Okay. So if we go back in time, the Latin word Virgo meant intact, self-contained. It certainly did not talk about sexual activity or inactivity and you know, prudishness. In fact, it tended to be used to refer to a young woman, so not married, a woman who was independent, not owned by a man. Examples were priestesses, who were completely independent, but they did have sex, sacred sex. And also, if you think about goddesses, we talked about Pallas Athena earlier, and you know, a goddess that's widely considered to signify Virgo is Demeter or Ceres, and she was absolutely without a man, so she ruled alone. She was independent, and she also, you know, enjoyed bedding men occasionally. So, and she was considered a Virgo, so intact and self-contained, like many other goddesses. So this to say that the Virgo prudishness, you know, what we today associate often with the Virgo sign, no sex, thank you, we're British, right? Actually was probably added to the mythology in the post-Christian era. So where does the Virgo myth come from? It goes back to Babylonian times. It was one of the oldest original signs, and it was first associated with Spica in the sky, which obviously in Latin means grain or furrow, and it is part of the constellation. It was part of the constellation of the Maiden. In Egyptian astrology, we have that this sign and the constellation were called the Maiden. And again, it referred to a woman between the ages of puberty and marriage. And finally, the Greeks associated this particular constellation to the goddess Astrea, who was the last goddess to leave humanity, to leave Earth. When all the gods, after God had, Zeus had created humans and the rest of the gods were appalled by human behavior and wars and all of the terrible things that we do, all the gods decided to leave Earth and move to the Olympus. And Astrea was still trying to make it work out, but in the end she had to give up. She was too disgusted because she was too pure to live among dirty mankind, and fled and became the constellation Virgo in the sky. Sensible. Did somebody say sensible? So even today, one of the symbols of Virgo is a virgin carrying sheets of grain. And this goes back to the original goddess, the great goddess, Demeter or Ceres, that we were talking about, the goddess of agriculture, harvest, and motherhood. So, as we said before, Demeter used to rule alone originally, so she was perfectly self-contained. She didn't need a man to be the great goddess that she was, and yet she was the nurturer of life itself. Later on, in European art of the Renaissance, they started adding wings to images of Demeter. And this, once again, led to the concept of prudishness and sexlessness, if you like, that was sometimes associated with the sign. Apart from the myths and symbols, so what is the real motivation, the real raison d'être for Virgo? How many Virgos do we have here, or people with strong Virgo, by the way? Okay, so you have strong Virgo.
Loads of stuff on the midheaven.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And who else? Oh, okay. Anybody else?
Pluto, Uranus, and Mercury.
Planets in Virgo, if that counts.
Sorry?
Natal ascendant, but with lots of planets progressed into Virgo.
Okay.
I had 6 at one point.
Sorry, as you were saying?
I have Mercury, depending on the house style, but Pluto and Uranus in Virgo in the 8th.
Okay. And you as well?
Rising, Virgo rising, and Venus Pluto conjunction.
Oh, like me. Okay.
Virgo rising and Pluto, Venus, Uranus.
Wow.
Virgo.
Okay, so you are from the
I'm
60s?
from that generation.
You are from the generation. We'll be talking about you then.
Well, all of us, I mean, it was going in and out of
Yeah.
production for the whole of the 60s.
Yes.
And up to 1970, actually.
Yeah. Fabulous. So this is my interpretation of what motivates Virgo. What's at the, what makes their core organizing principle. And then you guys can tell me if I'm on the right track or not. But so fundamentally, the big drive is this being self-possessed, is an integrated identity that doesn't need another person or other people to realize himself or herself. So Virgo is the 5th sign in the Zodiac wheel, and as such, it contains, it's the 5th, sorry, the 6th, and it contains all the signs that have come before. Ah, that's your Virgo ascendant there. So it contains the Aries independence, it contains the Taurian sensuality, the Gemini's mind and interest in communication, and everything else that's come before. Basically, it's all encompassed in Virgo, and it's the last sign before the relational signs. So it's all about the individual development. And what Virgo does really, really well is synthesizing and integrating knowledge, experiences, and this with an eye to providing a well-functioning whole, so integrating, blending, taking disparate concepts, disparate knowledge, and bringing it together and making it work. But making it work for a very practical reason, with a practical aim in mind. Virgo doesn't like wasting effort or doing things inefficiently. So there has to be a good reason for what they're doing and a good outcome. And there's almost this sense that Virgo is constant, because Virgo is constantly working on improvement and self-improvement, taking coarse base materials and turning them into gold. There's this sense that Virgo is constantly preparing for a next phase, a next stage, that nobody knows, they don't even know what it is. But there's this sense of, we've got to prepare for what follows, what comes later. And it is all about purification, so taking base substances and components and purifying them, and avoiding contamination. So Virgo fears contamination. Sorry, I've just gone too far. Fears contamination, fears chaos, fears the unknown. Virgo needs to control the environment, needs to control, if there is any element of not knowing the unknown, as we were saying, there is panic. And then where would we stand without knowing what our next step should be? Does this ring a bell with the Virgos in the room?
No. I would use a Virgo to build a house.
Right.
And as a surveyor, but I wouldn't use it for psychological stuff, because they're just too rigid. They're very process-driven.
Okay.
Virgos. They could do with a lot of Pisces, inside.
But there's always a Pisces in a Virgo,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
They integrate.
And that's the fear, that's the terror, because they know that there is the Pisces in them, and they try to control that.
But they're really hard workers. Like, look at Madonna, Venus, Pluto,
Yeah.
Ceres, Ascendant Virgo. Look at the drive and the dedication. Look at the effort she puts in.
Yeah.
They get the job done.
I find moon in Virgo they're craftsmen.
Yes.
Mendelssohn had it, Mozart had it,
Mm.
and they're just craftsmen.
Yes.
They love perfection.
Yeah, mastery.
Yeah, mastery.
They need to be masters at what they do.
I'm going to say something similar. It's the sign of the critic and the craftsman.
Yes.
So they actually, their skills actually always have a practical, like, they're carpenters or they, attention to detail, basically,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yes.
And, I can get the alchemical sort of illusion.
So I'll go back to the rulers later, because I think that should have been earlier, but gifts and talents. So there is no doubt that Virgos are great discriminators, very analytical, highly, let's be honest, they tackle any problem with a logical mind, and they will get a result, inevitably. But whatever you ask them, whatever you give them, the answer is never black and white. There's always a multitude of connections and associations and dependencies and interdependencies. It's a puzzle, basically, everything. Because the world, life, is not simple. Definitely not for a Virgo. Life is very complex. And this is reflected in how their mind works and what they can do with their minds as well, because they learned to manage that. You're laughing.
No, I use my Virgos, because I was a lawyer. I use it for that.
Yes.
And I use it for a lot of other, when I do building works. But I don't really use it for anything else, because it has no use for me. I use my
But you
own
use it.
side.
Okay. Well, lucky you.
Kitchen, is it how you are?
Yeah, of course I can choose. I have free will. This is what bless you.
So another keyword, as well as discrimination, another keyword for Virgo is synthesis. They are really masters at bringing, as I was saying earlier, a lot of random information, random data, and making something useful out of it, making it make sense. They like classifying. If they can't label things, then these things don't exist in a way. And measuring and ordering and putting in a sequence and just creating order out of chaos. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they are super tidy and super clean and all of that. But wherever they are inward looking or outward looking, they create order wherever they can. So, as we said before, we all know that Virgos are incredibly efficient. They are practical and they are helpful. They need to feel that they're needed and that they are useful. And they're craftsmen. There's craftsmanship there. So they do everything with accuracy, precision. They have high standards, a lot of hard work. They're not scared of the hard work because their focus is providing something pure and synthesized that's integrated and works for the particular object in mind. They also have a particular symbiosis. They're very in tune with nature. They tend to be very green and often eco warriors as well. And there's and they tend to have this kind of healing. They love healing, and whether it is in the like a healer or whether just helping with medicine and drugs and herbs, all of these things. There's a natural association with Chiron, for example. Some people say might perhaps be the ruler of Virgo. And their sign is known for the mind-body connection. They're always perfectly attuned. They're always aware of all the things that are going on, whether that means, digestion not going well or whether not sleeping and so on. There's this kind of body awareness, which in many cases, it is linked also with some, mental, sometimes stress. It can manifest itself in the body, especially with Virgo personalities. And so it can be a good thing, but also sometimes, a bad thing because Virgos tend to be very highly strung naturally. So one thing that people sometimes don't realize is that Virgos really want to help. Sometimes they come across and they say things in a very unpleasant way. They just blurt it out. But they don't really mean to hurt or to come across as being judgmental and critical. They genuinely want to help. It just comes out like that. So just give them, the credit sometimes and just, try to see the world from their point of view where they see everything, things not right, not working well, not, going wrong. And they want to do something about it. They want to do something to make it better. That's what they want. They want to make it better. So, and sometimes they just don't use the right words. They're not the best diplomats necessarily. But they are supportive and they are kind and very polite as well and considerate. They'll always think of you and your needs and other people's needs. They're always aware of the little thing, even if they don't tell you that they've noticed, but even if they don't show it, they don't sing it out loud, you just realize that when you're around them, things just, you will have a glass of water ready, or you will have, if you like some sugar, then you'll have the sugar, whatever it is, they know what you need and what you want, and they'll do what they can to give it to you without making a fuss, very humbly. Yes. They are humble, conscientious, very reasonable, so you can talk to them. If you have a problem with them, you can talk to them. They don't like drama in general, but they do like a logical approach. A logical debate is very welcome. And they're very adaptable as well. So they start off maybe on a position of, but this is how you do things. And then you talk with them and they will see your point of view. And if it works, they will embrace it. And definitely, they're great problem solvers. Just give them any problem, and they will deal with it, and they will solve it for you. Anything else? Any other gifts and talents you can think of?
They are there to serve people. They could be good, PA.
Oh, that's mean.
People's needs in a business, or they can be there to serve as a nurse working in the hospitals, caring.
But that's because they're humble. They don't have a strong ego.
Mm.
And, you know, and they love to help.
They belong to that axis, the Virgo Pisces axis, which
Of
is
service.
Saviour and victim. There's that.
That's what Cairo
I like
is.
that,
My
yes.
son has 6 planets in Virgo.
Yeah.
And when he was a baby, when he was a little boy, he said, "How can I help? How can I
Oh,
help?" Still does
sweet.
that. 6
Very
planets,
sweet.
poor guy.
Virgos are very meticulous with their hands.
Yes.
They're very good with their hands.
Yeah, very good with the hands. Well, it's a mercurial sign. I mean, depending on what you believe is the ruler, Mercury is about the hands. So,
Everything needs to be proven, though.
yeah.
The information. They're not
It's an earth sign, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's, Gemini Mercury is the information gatherer. Doesn't need to be proven.
No,
so long as it
exactly.
comes from a good
Exactly.
source, you know.
Absolutely. And you know, that's to me, Virgo.
Yeah, the
That's
glasses-
definitely me, anyway.
The glasses, yeah. And the stripes have to be straight as well.
Francesca
And they're green
put it on
stripes.
Instagram a while back and I
They're green
stole it.
stripes. The mat is green. Eco-friendly. It's supposed to be a paper man.
Yeah. So all of this is always going on in the mind of a Virgo. There's not just one thought, a million thoughts, a million worries, a million anxieties. Yeah. So they are, whether you know it or not, they're incredibly sensitive. Very sensitive. So they may not show it, they may not let you know, but they, you know, you need to be really careful around them. Because they're very giving, but without asking for anything back. But if you don't give it to them, they know it. It's a bit like that. They don't ask for it, but they want it. They're highly strung. In general, if you work with a Virgo, there is this kind of nervous tension and stress constantly. Sorry, were you trying to? No, your hand is up. Just okay. Work very hard. They're very predictable because you know they have a process. They have a way of doing things, right? And that is the right thing because they're all about efficiency. And so for efficiency purposes, you need a process. You need steps.
And you need routine.
And you need routine.
That's one of the key
Yeah.
things. Routine and duty comes
Yeah.
into it big time.
Absolutely. They are a bit obsessive compulsive. Would you agree? They tend to do things again and again and again, which is what you were saying. And often a bit hypochondriac, you know, just they worry they've got all possible diseases.
Yeah, my leader is-
It's Sun and Ascendant. If it's Sun Virgo and Ascendant Aries,
Right.
then it's hypochondria.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Specifically.
I-
Why is that, would you think?
Well, they worry about themselves, you know.
Right,
physically,
focus on
because
them, on the body.
The ascendant is the physical body, and Aries just, you know, it's me.
Me,
first.
me, me.
Me first. So the combination.
Hypochondria has got a bad reputation. What it actually means is the body affected by the mind. because
Which
it's
is, yeah.
the mind. And when the mind is stressed, the body becomes sick.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if the body is sick, the mind becomes stressed.
Yeah. And this is especially strong in Virgos, as we said. There's this really strong mind and body connection.
I've got my Virgo Saturn is in the 7th, and I think it's got a strong connection with health and cookery.
Oh, yes.
Because I tend to teach my girlfriends how to cook, or I cook for them regardless, and try and get them to lead a healthier life.
Yeah.
I usually succeed with that.
Very good. Yeah, very good. That's Virgos try to do that. They try to teach.
But it's definitely to do with the cooking. It's definitely health.
It's about good nutrition. It's about being healthy, right?
Well, my mother is a typical worker. All this apply to her, but the amount of fat she uses in cooking is extraordinary. And then she has a fatty liver and problem with digestion.
Where's her
and
Jupiter?
brain. Everything in the 6th house.
But what sign is Jupiter in?
Everything in the 6th house of Virgo. Everything conjunct.
Everything?
Everything.
Wow. But maybe because she goes Jupiter there, that's fat. Okay.
And also Chiron conjunct Mercury. Always talking about the
Health. But also, she's ascendant Aries, right? Aries ascendant. Of course, she's always talking about herself. Sorry, no Aries in the room, right? So they have this, they're constantly thinking of things, overcritical. They can be fastidious and judgmental. We all know, right? They can be so critical sometimes. And it's really frustrating, isn't it?
Yes.
We all agree on that. We can't avoid that. And but this is because they have a strong need for security. It's an earth sign, needs security, needs to play safe, and also lacks confidence to a large degree. Most earth signs have that to some degree, but Virgo is absolutely the one that has it the most. And just like Capricorn and Taurus, it has a strong need to control its environment. So, as I was saying earlier, fear of chaos, contamination, and the unknown. And sometimes, because of all the processes that it puts in place, sometimes, all of the steps that need to be followed and so on, it feels like there's it's a bit detached emotionally, cold emotionally, and unromantic in matters of the heart. But is it though? Anybody has a Virgo or Virgo dominant partner? Nope.
I have a Virgo dominant relative, and I know. She has stellium in Virgo.
Okay.
House. So
And what in the 5th house? That's interesting.
yeah,
What does she do?
children.
Oh,
She's the best.
oh, of course.
Looking after
She cares
She
deeply.
cares deeply.
Yeah.
She really does.
Okay, so this is anything else that you think we should say about the shadow of Virgo?
Very humble as well. Like
Yeah,
they tend not to be very confident at times.
yeah. So, is the ruler of Virgo? We all know that it's Mercury according to the tradition. Do we all agree that it's Mercury? Or is it Chiron?
I think Chiron's a really good fit, actually.
Hmm. So who thinks it's Mercury here? Show of hand. Okay, it's less than half the room. And who thinks it's Chiron? Similar number, just a little bit less. What about Ceres? Nobody. Sorry?
We don't know much about. I don't know much about it.
Well, this is Demeter, basically, the great goddess that we were talking about earlier. Yeah, it's a new, it's actually not an asteroid. It's a dwarf planet, similar size to Pluto. So if there is one asteroid to look at, it's Ceres, just because of that.
How does it work on the chart? Because, is it a connection?
Hmm?
What does it stand for, Ceres? What is its symbolism?
Motherhood.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's a good fit for
It's nurturing, caring, providing a home environment type of thing, mothering.
I don't feel it's a good
Yeah.
fit.
Okay, and then we got Astrea, who was a Greek goddess, of course, and she was about purity and also justice, but not Libra justice. It's fairness, the Virgo way, but it's all debatable. And then they've been talking about Vulcan for a long time.
Liz Green speaks about Vulcan.
Yeah.
She spoke about it.
So it's like they were waiting for a new planet to be discovered called Vulcan. But then they found Chiron and they didn't accept that as a candidate. So they're still looking for Vulcan.
Wasn't Vulcan a theoretical planet to
yeah.
counterbalance Mercury?
Yes.
To the sun, yeah.
Yeah.
Some astrologers use that.
What does a squirrel actually mean? What's she got this all?
Well, she's purity and what did she say? What did I say earlier?
She was the last to live with humanity.
Yes, she was the last to leave humanity, and she represents the constellation itself. And yeah, she was about purity and perfection and everything right and everything in the right order and sequence. So it's a bit Virgo-like, to be honest. Okay. So I'm done with the general stuff about Virgo. Anything that anybody wants to say on top before we move on to some additional things?
When the Pluto Uranus came of age, you notice all a lot of them were into ecology, like travelling or ecological living. Also, body art, tattooing, piercings came in about 20 years ago. That generation came to maturity. All
Right.
Body art, tattooing. That's
You're going forward. You're one step ahead. Because
Virgo, the body,
because this is what I want to talk about. It is about the body,
And
but
the body and the environment as well.
yes, it's all part of that generation. So Uranus and Pluto in Virgo, fascinating combination, very powerful. It's changed our lives, whether we realize it or not, forever, probably.
Barack Obama had that.
Yeah. But there's more to it than just that, and I'll show you why, which I find very exciting, but it could just mean my background, so excuse me if that's the case. I may be biased. So Uranus and Pluto in Virgo. They were both in Virgo between 61 and 69, but they were conjunct only between 64 and 68 in this period. Chiron, which at the time was undiscovered, was in Pisces, opposite Pisces. And Saturn as well for a short time between 64 and 67. So if you look at that layout there, here we've got Pluto and Uranus in Virgo, opposite Saturn and Chiron. And then we've got Neptune in Scorpio, also in aspect. It's quite a significant decade. This lasted, almost a decade for all of it. Just, Saturn was there just for like 3 years or so, 2.5 years. But this was fundamental, very significant. And of course, it was the decade in which, we all know the 60s are the counterculture, the flower power, the sex and the drugs, all of that, right? Such a revolutionary decade. And usually when there's a revolution like that, you would look at Uranus, right? But Uranus is just the awakener. Uranus wakes you up only. You need more than just Uranus to complete the revolution, to take it to full term. And we will look at that in a minute. But what I think is really interesting is that, obviously, when you look at mundane cycles, a conjunction is the beginning of a new cycle. And it tends to be, for these outer planets, it tends to be in the same sign or element for several centuries, in essence. And then it changes, like we're going to have the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction coming up in 2021, and that will shift to air from Earth, and it will be quite momentous, because it hasn't happened, we've had basically Earth for, is it 500 years or something like that? I don't know. But anyway.
Apart from 1980.
200 years in an element.
Sorry?
It's 200 years in an element.
For Saturn and Jupiter. Yeah. So it's quite significant. It's coincided with the Industrial Revolution and capitalism and all of that. Let's see what happens when it moves to air. Now, as far as the 60s are concerned, so that's the beginning of a new cycle because it was a conjunction between Uranus and Pluto. But what was ending? What was the cycle that preceded it? It started in the mid-19th century. This cycle that ended in the 60s. And it's basically the time of the Industrial Revolution, when Industrial Revolution spread around the world and the life of man changed. So you see how significant these two planets are when they come together.
It's also the end of the baby boomers era.
Yeah.
It finished in 63, 64. The Generation X started after that.
And so we had a decade of incredible radical liberalization, incredible scientific step change, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and deep transformation of consciousness like we'd never had before. And by not even the end of the decade, most of the Western world had been transformed very rapidly. Oops, is that? Okay, so I just had this first. Come on. Okay. So what happened in the 60s? Civil rights, obviously everybody knows about that, big topic. We also had rampant inflation. There was the Vietnam War, which escalated during the decades. The Cuban crisis, the various assassinations in America. So the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, the student protests, the drugs, the hippies, and generally speaking, social ferment everywhere. There was this, activism. Everybody was active in some kind of protest or movement, and everybody became politicized as well. A lot more interest in making a difference. And but what is interesting is that, so while it all exploded in the 60s, some of these changes were introduced in the 1890s. I think it was the Neptune and Uranus in Gemini, I think it was, that kind of opened the mind. And so you had spiritual awakening, you had ecological awareness as well. It started back then. The women's movement, which became very important in the 60s, but obviously started earlier. And changes in diet and lifestyle, even simple things that, we don't necessarily like them, but, like whether it's McDonald's, whether it's Kellogg's, and, all of this kind of mass production. Unfortunately, it does come from, this uber efficient Virgo era. So because we're talking of big cycles, we're still in the process of assimilating and integrating these changes. So we are not done yet. We have to finish when there's another conjunction, most likely, or an opposition to really integrate these changes. And so the next Uranus-Pluto opposition is in 2046 in Pisces, so Virgo Pisces with swap. And then the conjunction will be in 2104 in Taurus. So that's when we will know what all of this was about, pretty much.
I always thought the punk rock movement, which started in the early 80s, was a throwback from the Pluto-Uranus conjunction.
I think so, yeah, I agree.
Body art.
It started in 76 and mid-70s.
Yes.
Mid-70s it started.
But it became popular in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Also interesting if you think of the awakening of consciousness that LSD that was manufactured through the Vietnam War was again the opening of those sort of pathways.
Absolutely.
Instead this time.
Yeah. Talking of the Vietnam War, it was in the news recently about Agent Orange, wasn't it? Horrible, Neptune in Scorpio type of thing. Okay, so this is one of the most significant human inventions ever. This is at the same level as penicillin and possibly the wheel and the Industrial Revolution. I don't know if you're aware of it, but this is the circuit or the microchip which made the personal computing possible. And that means this laptop, mobile phones, everything in our lives today. Whether you go to a hospital to get some checks done, whether the government is running some stats, or even simply the fact that on social media you've got this erosion of traditional centralized institutions. Now it's all from the bottom up rather than from governments and authorities telling us what to do. Now everybody has got a voice. And this has changed humanity. It's changed the way we communicate. It's changed the way we relate to one another. We relate as nations, for example. There's not a concept of nations anymore, really. And this all started in the 60s. So the first successful attempt at a microchip was on the 12th of September in 1958. There had been previous attempts, but this was the only one, the first one to work. And what it did, it allowed to build things faster, make them smaller so that they could fit everywhere, and cheaper as well.
That's a very Virgo thing.
It's a very Virgo thing.
Smaller and more efficient.
Absolutely.
That's a Virgo thing.
And intricate as well. Very elaborate. but it's been pervasive. The effect is unbelievable today. You may not realize, but this is one of the greatest inventions ever that's changed our lives. So, yeah, I'll skip the rest anyway, and we'll look at the first demo. So it was in 58, so Uranus was still in Leo at the time, but Pluto was in Virgo, conjunct Mercury, there, 2 degrees. And look at that, Jupiter and Neptune were in Scorpio, in early Scorpio. And there was quite a bit of action there in Virgo. Now, I don't know the exact time, unfortunately, so I've just chosen midday, just a midday chart. But I think it just literally paves the way for everything that follows. And it's interesting that we've got this Virgo Scorpio going on here. Any thoughts on this?
I like the fact that Saturn trines
Yes, Uranus, absolutely.
Which is to do with computers,
Make,
hardware and
yes,
software.
create something solid and durable and form.
It's hard, soft, and software.
Yes.
It's all.
Software.
Yes, one can't work without that.
Yeah.
The software is the Uranus, the hardware is the Saturn.
Absolutely. Brilliant. I think it's a great chart. And then you look at Jack Kilby, the man who actually won a Nobel Prize for this in 2000, I think. Sorry? North Node, 7 degrees of Virgo. Again, I don't know the birth time, unfortunately, but you can see that, again, there's the Scorpio theme and the Virgo theme there, recurring again. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like Virgo ascendant or something like that, because he seemed to be quite a modest, humble man as well. Look at that beautiful trine, though, Very, there's a good flow between Pluto, the Sun, and Uranus. Again, Pluto and Uranus there. But, so Jack Kilby's idea was to use germanium as a material on which to imprint the circuits. And there was a debate, of course, when he published, when he got the patent for his idea, and then there was somebody else called Richard Noyce, I can't remember, who, on the other hand, proposed using silicon rather than germanium. And he also filed a patent and got a patent later on. And but what Mr. Royce did, he founded Intel in 1968. And of course, Intel is the world's &1 manufacturer of microchips today, even today. Since then, it's the #1 in the world. And he used silicon for his microchips. And what do we have in the foundation of Intel? We've got, of course, Pluto, Uranus there, around 20-25 degrees of Virgo. We have a, what do you call that?
In conjunct.
Sorry?
Saturn, Uranus in conjunct.
Yeah, again.
Precise.
But also we have this kind of like, what do you call it, small talent triangle? Super talent, small triangle?
Sextile.
Yeah, so basically it's 2 sextiles and the trine, which indicates usually great talent.
Yes.
It's a kite.
Cradle.
It's a kite.
It's not a kite.
Well,
It's a cradle.
It's a grand trine.
Yeah, it's a cradle. Yeah, but usually for the kite you have to have an opposition.
Like with diamond.
there's no kite.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at this one here. So Mars, Sun,
Yeah.
Neptune, and then this is the focal
Kite
apex.
in opposition to Uranus. It's very interesting.
What do you think that means?
Is that because they started off with the wrong material and they had to take it from the other guy? Is that what it
No, they had the right material from the
They
start.
had silicon.
Yeah, they had silicon. Sorry? Somebody said something? No?
I'm not sure about the properties of germanium, but one of the properties of silicon is you can slice it very, very thin into wafers.
Yeah.
But you can do the germanium too.
No?
The germanium has advantages that it's silicon, it's my area. And the silicon hadn't even been thought of as a material, except as a dope, sign to dope germanium. And these are different metals that they put together, and they act as diodes or transistors or whatever. But the whole silicon revolution was you could print these things by photographic means and make it much, much smaller.
Yeah, that
Less
makes sense.
expensive
Actually.
material too, because it's more pervasive.
Well, there's a lot of it around.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem with germanium is it's a rare
It's a
material.
rare material.
It's Saturn ruled, isn't it, silica?
Probably sounds right. Yeah, from silica.
Sun square Saturn.
It has to be incredibly pure, 99.997%.
What's that, geranium?
No,
Silicon.
silicon.
Silica.
And Sun, which is the creation, square Saturn, so that's quite
Yeah.
good.
For me, that always means longevity, you know, durability. When I see Sun, Saturn, always. Yeah. Okay, so this doesn't mean that's something I left over from something from earlier. So I just want to go through some natal charts now, some specific Virgo examples. Interestingly, two of these charts, I don't know if you can go through all of them, but two of these charts I don't have the birth time for, but I think you can still tell a lot just from looking at the rest of the chart. So the first one is Bernie Sanders. He's back in the news.
Yeah, he was across the pond, wasn't he?
He's announced his candidacy.
But there's a lot of strong people in Democrats.
Yeah. So ignore the House division because we don't know the birth time. Although somewhere I read that his mother thinks that he was born between 9 and 10 p.m. So I wouldn't give him like an Aquarius rising, but it's not finalized, it's not confirmed. So what do we have? We have Sun. I'm going to look here because I can't see that. So Sun, North Node, and Neptune in Virgo. Mercury in Libra, and Venus in Libra, opposite Mars. Then we've got Uranus at 0 degrees Gemini, quite significant. And it's trine Mercury, which gives him, quite a fast mind, brilliant mind, innovative. And what have we got? What else have we got? We've got Saturn, Neptune, and various other things. But what's interesting, which I think everybody can recognize in him, I think as well as the Mercury, Uranus, which is very telling, I think also the Moon, Mars in Aries. He is famous for being full of energy. He's quite aggressive sometimes in his statements. He's very is a warrior with words and in his opinion, and he's in politics. He's known for being very combative.
Yeah.
And what else have I got here?
But his Virgo Sun tempers that a lot, I think.
It does. So people know him as being. They say that he's he's actually, you can reason with him, you can talk with him. He may kind of throw a curveball and try to, when you're negotiating with him, it's really tough, but then he's very results focused. What's interesting is a quote from him when he was asked in 1988, why politics? And he said, even as a child, I looked around myself and could see so many things that were wrong, and I wanted to do something about it. So I think that's important. What's interesting about him is that he's an ideologist. He really believes in socialism and was very, an activist throughout his career. He managed, interestingly again, as an independent, he didn't have the financial backing that some of the big Democrats and conservatives had, but he managed to get millions of dollars in small campaign contributions from people who believed in him. And he comes from a lower class Jewish family, and in high school he was a long distance runner and started getting into politics at that point. He ran for student body president as in high school. Then in 1960 he joined the University of Chicago, and that's where his activism started. He joined supported the civil rights movements. He was arrested for protesting against segregation in off-campus housing. He joined the Martin Luther King March for Jobs and Freedom March. He also joined the Socialist Party of America as a student affiliate and applied for conscientious objector status as a protest against the Vietnam War. He also was sent to a kibbutz with his brother in Israel and absolutely loved this experience and came back almost like a changed man. So he loved the egalitarian, collectivist, and socialist way of life of the kibbutz. He discovered that he loved growing vegetables, very Virgo. And as a result, when he came back, he moved to rural Vermont and bought 85 acres of land. And he's always scuttling back to his vegetable patch and growing things. So it's still important to him. And so I think you can see these things, these representations of Virgo in him. Any other thoughts before I show you the next thing?
Why did it take him so long to go to politics?
Because he's an independent, because he's got radical ideas, because he's a socialist.
Yeah, America wasn't ready for it, was it?
Exactly. So this is when he announced his candidacy for the 2020 election. What do you think? Does he stand a chance? How's the campaign going to go?
There's a lot of strong contenders.
He's getting help from those planets in Capricorn, I think. Trialing his natal placements there.
Below the horizon.
There's also an alignment with the nodes, yeah? Mercury nodes there. This Neptune is concerning because it's opposite his Sun, I think. So there could be some scandal.
He's a Democrat, is that right?
He's a Democrat, but there's Marianne Williamson wants to run as well. I mean, she's a big author. There's a lot of people.
Could he be more towards the left because of the Saturn-Neptune square? That's very often the case with people who are almost communist in thinking.
Yeah. And I think I just wanted to show you, I don't know if you've looked at it, but this is from election day in 2020. Sorry, there's a lot of aspects there. I didn't switch them off. But you know what you normally do. You look at first house means the incumbent, and then the seventh house means the opponent, right? The rival, the contender. What's the word? Well, I don't know. This looks to me like there's Uranus popping out here. And Uranus is in conjunct a strong Venus in Libra. And the seventh house is ruled by Venus. So who knows? Could it be a woman?
The main thing is Uranus.
Yeah. That is, it's, look at that. Yeah. There's going to be a surprise, for sure.
But when it comes to government, when you're looking at a chart, one looks at the 10th and the 4th house axis.
There are different opinions, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, it kind of still brings us to that Sun Uranus anyway, because the Sun rules the 10th house, and Uranus co-ruling.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Saturn 4th house, but that's the axis that they tend to look at with government. So whoever's in power takes the 10th house, and then the opposition will take the 4th.
You can predict the unpredictable.
But let's not go there, because bigger astrologers than us got it so wrong. So last time.
In this country, we would put up a chart for the closing of polls, and we would look at the ascendant for the incumbent. In America, it's the descendant that's the incumbent, and the descendant that is the challengers. Why is that?
I know I heard that, but obviously you've got more experience. So.
I found it on the Astrology's website.
So if we got time, Karl Lagerfeld. What a character. So did you mourn his loss? No.
I watched a movie of him recently, and they showed him being on the plane and how he was holding a little cushion on his tummy.
Okay.
He said that he always does that because he's been just nervous.
Yeah.
Traveling.
Yeah, exactly. Very Virgo. So I'm not gonna. We won't have a lot of time, but what I wanted to highlight, I think it's two things that stand out for me. One is Mars, Mercury, Neptune. So he's known for his outrageous statements, right? Cutting, and sometimes spiteful, sometimes also quite racist. And another one that stands out for me is the T-square between Venus in Libra, obviously Venus in Libra with fashion, Uranus in Aries, and where is that? Pluto. So creative, innovative, controlling. Yeah? And some fascinating things he said. So on Pippa Middleton, I don't like Pippa's face. She should only show her back. And on Adele, she's a little too fat, but has a beautiful face and a divine voice. On Diana, she was pretty and sweet, but stupid. On Inès de la Fressange, who used to be his muse for a while, I wish her all the luck in the world, so long as I don't have to see her or hear her spoken about. How Virgo is that? What? Inès de la Fressange.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And then finally, in 2006, he said, vanity is the healthiest thing in life. So he owned a bookstore in Paris. He was very eccentric, of course. He liked casual cruelty. He was famous for these statements, and also for kind of encouraging, in a way, the terrible body image problem women have today. As part of that culture. So his mum was not very nice. Apparently. Sorry. And he said, on improving yourself, he said, improvise, become more creative, not because you have to, but because you want to. Evolution is the secret for the next step. Virgo.
It seems as though a lot of these things are gay designers seem to like women's bodies to look like boys.
Mm.
Yeah.
We have to stop.
No, you got.
Oh, okay.
You got a few minutes.
Stephen Fry, our favourite person. Yay! So.
5 more minutes. 5 more minutes, and we have to call it.
Okay. So.
Stephen Fry, I like Stephen.
Yes, you do like Stephen Fry. However, let me go and show you. What did he say? Nope, it's not that. I can't find it, so forget about it. So, Stephen Fry is Virgo. According to his autobiography, he's always born at 6 a.m. I don't know how accurate it is. And which would give him a late Leo rising, 29 degrees on Regulus. He 29. Well, he was 29, not anymore. What can we say about him? He is very fastidious, of course, as we know. He has a large Twitter following, huge. He suffers from bipolar, and once he disappeared from stage. He was supposed to perform in '95. He's a huge skeptic and doesn't shy away from saying so. He said, when asked what sign would you create for yourself? Skepsis is the sign. Yeah, he was quite, he's quite a vocal, what's the word?
Do you know why he is?
Why?
The story behind it, very quickly, is when he was younger, his father, because when he announced he was homosexual, his father took him to an astrologer. To try and find out why and he didn't like that. So that's why he's got it in big time for astrology. Yeah. So it was probably inappropriate approach from the father to try and to take him to an astrologer to try
Absolutely.
and talk about maybe that there's something wrong with him or something like that. So and that's one of the reasons.
That's interesting.
Why, yeah.
I didn't know that.
His father was quite heavily into it.
And I think he's true.
Sorry?
He says the opposite, but I think he's...
He's not a believer, is it?
Well, he wrote a book about myths, and in his program, behind him, he has a big wheel that looks like a chart.
Well, he's very inquisitive. He's very logical.
The Mars is only aspected by Saturn. For a man, that's not an easy horoscope for the masculine energy.
But look at that Sun-Pluto conjunction, partile. That's powerful. Yeah. And Leo Moon conjunct Uranus as well. You know, it's quite...
And it's got the chiron there as well.
Yeah. Saturn is strongly aspected in the chart. Very important planet in this chart. And and he's obviously he knows a lot. He's got a great wit, a very particular sense of humour.
Overweight because of Venus conjunct Jupiter.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes when you have that conjunction, things come easy to you. Everything is easy, right? So that's it. This is the last person I wanted to show you. I think I have Borges here, but as you can see, Mercury in Leo, just the Sun in Virgo. But an interesting chart anyway, and we know his birth time as well. So that was it from me. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And yeah.